Michael Irons, Worlds Old and New, by Nathan Moore. Chapter 16, A Simple Exorcism. Michael Irons, his black clothing inundated with dirt and dust, rolled and rose from where he had been thrown, the flintlock pistol he had been prevented from pulling finally in his hand. But the door had been slammed shut, sounding heavier than he might have expected, and no further foe was immediately found. Angered at being so easily deceived and trapped, he wrenched with unnecessary forcefulness his greatsword free from the fresh corpse of the sole villager he had managed to slay amid the press and rush, then cleaned it on the man's clothes and began to examine his surroundings. The small house into which he had been pushed and imprisoned was little more than a shack. There were no furnishings, its conditions were utterly unkempt, all dust and dirt, holding only two small rooms of equal size. Where Irons stood seemed intended to have been a combination kitchen and dining room, while the other would have presumably served as a bedroom. Therein, Irons saw nearly the entire floor was occupied by a large pit, leading down into a tunnel. He assumed whatever resided therein was likely what the townfolk intended to sate with his carcass. Then he also considered they must have confidence in its strength, since they had not bothered attempting to disarm him. This thought prompted Irons to first seek escape, though he greatly doubted egress would be so easily found. The walls, ramshackle in appearance from the outside, proved to have been reinforced and were very sturdy. His eyes drifted toward the ceiling next, but the soft sound of movement within the pit cut short further investigation, and it seemed vanquishing whatever monster resided here would first require his attentions. Displeased with being forced to face an unknown enemy without preparation, Irons nevertheless set himself to the task. The body of the slain villager, having first tackled Irons, then fallen upon him in death, remained before the cabin's only door. The noise of action, and now the smell of the dead man, it seemed to Irons, had summoned the hole's occupant, and he secreted himself against the wall behind the hole's facing, hoping to catch whatever ungodly creature appeared by surprise. He waited, great sword prepared, hoping the corpse, warming in the stifling desert heat, would overwhelm any other scent. A quiet tread drew very close, became distinct. A man appeared, disheveled and bloody, but, most importantly, his eyes were black, a characteristic of a person possessed by a lesser demon. Irons changed tactic immediately. As the possessed put hands on the corpse, Irons gave up his sword in favor of holy water, then, with a fierce utterance of righteous rebuke, he flung a gout of the blessed liquid upon the creature. The demon shrieked as if it had caught fire, and the possessed body fell, thrashing in a rigid manner, jaw locked and back arched, akin to a seizure. The option of silence now disregarded, Irons clutched his rosary of obsidian beads and held the ivory crucifix, hunching over the stunned and slavering demon, thrusting the cross directly before the possessed man's black eyes. The demon, despite its pain, recoiled and froze, fixated upon the hated icon in anguish and fear. The creature rasped a query in a demonic tongue, its voice sounding raw as if utterly parched. "Speak thy purpose, creature," whispered Irons in elevated English, his voice harsh with disdain. "In the name of Christ I compel thee. How didst thou come to this place, and for what intent?" "Summons!" the possessed squeaked, its black eyes shut tight, trying to avert its head from the cross. "Summoned were we." "We can accompany thee." The creature flinched and cringed and shrunk into a fetal ball, palms before its face in an attempt to shield itself. "5! Myself and 5 others! Release me!" "Thou art hellbound, fiend!" And Irons stood erect, eyes ablaze. "By the inexhaustible power of God, by the holy name of Christ, be gone!" The thrashing intensified, and a great jet of darkness like smoke erupted forth. Then the body went limp as if boneless. Irons checked and found the cleansed man still breathed. The freed man seemed to be in his early 20s, and the harshness of his previous predicament left him pale and parched. He was of average height and build, his youthful features and dark skin typical of Spanish Indian unions, a mixture now entirely native to the Spanish Empire's New World conquests. With some effort, Irons revived the lad. After a brief start, as if waking from a fright, the young man came about. But while awake, the toll upon his mind and body seemed to have left him faint and delirious. He muttered in Spanish, head lolling as if still half asleep, and Irons decided against questioning the man at this moment. "Rest by the door," Irons encouraged in Spanish. "I will return after I have cleansed these rats." Whether he heard or not, the Spaniard lay back, eyes already closed again, and the moment his head touched the floorboards, almost at once the quiet sounds of sleep began. Irons rechecked his weapons and prepared to venture into the hole. He could not help but note the unconscious man was dressed in a similar manner to the townsfolk he had so briefly seen as they rushed and mobbed him. He shook his head, perplexed as to the nature of this remote desert town. Regardless, there remained 5 more possessed persons for Irons to cleanse. He drew his twin flintlock pistols and advanced into the dugout passage. The interior was a rudimentary corridor most akin to a mining shaft, given form and support with regular sturdy beams creating a patchwork frame. Between these planks and the reinforced walls of the cabin, Irons wondered if perhaps there was a grove of respectable trees somewhere nearby. If so, it certainly did not lay in the direction from which he had ridden, having experienced naught but flat desert there for days. With silent step, he pushed on through the dim, candle-lit tunnel, the air growing thicker and less healthful as he proceeded. There was also a rancid scent, first of improperly buried excrement, but then also of rotted flesh. After a near 2 minutes of cautious movements, Irons perceived a door at the end of the mine's tunnel. The distance, the heavy air, and the closed door inclined him to believe the cries uttered by the excised demon had not penetrated into this room. Voices could be heard as he approached, 2 speaking most often, another 2 occasionally, leaving one demon unconfirmed. The door possessed no keyhole or observable crack, and Irons therefore resolved as he put his hand to the door to storm the room. He readied a fresh vial of holy water in one hand, a pistol in the other. This he gripped by the barrel so he might use it as a club. He kicked the door in. All 5 possessed persons were present, black eyes trained on Irons. All were unsurprised, and stood in a line on the other side of the room, a few smiling, a few scowling. Water and pistol remaining ready, Irons produced a scowl of his own. "I seem to have been expected," he decided aloud. "Indeed," the tall, lanky one in the middle agreed in English. The demon's chosen manner of speech was practiced, low and smooth, and the aristocratic bent smacked of insult. "Dost thou possess inquiries, or shall we fall to fisticuffs at once?" "Get thee from this place," returned Michael Irons, matching the tone with his own mocking cynicism, "and leave these forms unmolested." "Posh!" the demon waved a dismissive hand. "Were not thou cast into the demon lair by their fellows?" Irons frowned, silent. "Hast thou considered by what manner my fellows and I came upon this place? Not a sheep or oxen to be seen, nor even a starved steed." The demon's black eyes glittered merrily in the candlelight. "The scent of cooked flesh called to us. The black souls of the townsfolk drew us." Now the demon grinned wide, yellow teeth shining. "Didst thou note the lack of children?" With a broad tongue the demon licked his cracked and bloody lips. "Canst thou imagine, slave of faith? They cast us the odd traveler whilst they sup upon the veal." Now the black eyes rolled back and his head lolled about, face twisted in rage. Were we able to escape from this prison? Oh, to feast on the flesh of those who presume to keep us bound. The fringes of Iron's vision had grown red as he heard the demon's words. He was loath to believe it or any word uttered by such spawn, and yet the notions he had set aside before now returned to the forefront of his mind. Free us! The demon grinned wide, malicious intent beyond human ken burning in his eyes, so that we may rain upon yon cannibal's bloody punishment well deserved. Irons was stunned. A worn and cynical appearance I may possess, he declared, but do not mistake my manner. Irons spun his pistol on his palm to grip it right and shot, parting the tall demon's possessed head like the Red Sea, then lashed a wide swath of holy water, bellowing a benediction as he did. The first pistol was dropped, the second drawn as he closed the distance, another holy entreaty on his lips, and another slash of the water. The second shot hollowed a heart, and black hell smoke was sent screaming from the fatal wound. The water spent, he drew his greatsword and lay about the remaining fiends, cleaving one through the brain, stabbing another in the heart. The final demon, steaming and hissing under the holy water, recovered enough to rush forward while the great sword of Irons was still sheathed in the new corpse, but found himself transfixed by the sudden appearance of a broad hunting knife within his forehead, thrown unerring to skewer his brain. All was over in a matter of moments. And if what the demon spoke was true, what followed would be a very bitter afterdraught. Irons reloaded both flintlock pistols, cleaned and sheathed his blade, then, with one pistol in hand, he returned from the mine and out into the fortified house. He nudged the sleeping man into a fitful waking. Crouched over the man as he rubbed his eyes, Irons knelt by him and said, "The demons are banished." The young man sighed with relief, almost looking ready to fall asleep once more with such a weight from his mind. "They spoke of cannibalism," added Irons. There was a stiffening to the man's posture, and when his eyes snapped open, the pupils were contracted, jolted into wakefulness. "Demons," the lad licked his lips, "are infamous liars." Irons cocked his pistol and leveled it. For a moment the young man remained strong, but his feigned indignation soon gave way to the fear of one about to be judged. Irons fired. The act of escape, now that he had time and leisure, became elementary when the ceiling was properly examined. Once darkness had fallen to his satisfaction, Irons went to work. Within an hour of silence, enough boards were pried free to allow him passage. After finding his black steed well and unharmed, he fed and watered the animal in preparation for departure. Then he set about quietly gathering kindling and wood. This he bundled about the various houses and buildings. When all was ready, Irons set it ablaze. Awash in heat, even from a distance of 100 paces, Irons watched the cannibal town become engulfed, the fire-filled windows allowing him the glimpse of multiple persons gorging themselves upon each other's flesh, even as they burned together.